People have been staying at home for about 2 months now. As the country adjusted to a new normal of living from home, some were and still are suffering the effects of being cooped up indoors. Cases of domestic violence have increased by about 22% during this period. Family Violence Specialist Centres and PAVE Integrated Services for Individual and Family Protection saw a 37% increase in enquiries 2 weeks into the circuit breaker. And MSF Adult and Child Protective Services saw a 14% increase in enquiries. Is being at home for prolonged periods of time the only factor at play here?
So I think in order to respond to that question, we need to define what domestic violence is. Domestic violence is a pattern of behavior in any relationship that's used to gain or maintain power and control.
I think on the surface, everyone is like prolonged period staying at home. That's why I got more. But is there any other reason we're missing?
We suspect that we might be seeing an increase in domestic violence because abusers are seeking a sense of control over their disrupted lives. Covid-19 has actually led to any semblance of control being taken away from you. You've lost control of where you go. You know what you can do. You might not even have control over whether you're going to have your job in a couple of months or if you have control over your finances. There is a direct link between the experience of job loss and material hardship of the kind we're seeing right now and abusive behavior. Now, if you were to look at the period before COVID-19 began to spread, right, we were receiving calls from people who were being domestically abused. You know, people would call us to say that they have been isolated, that their abusers are trying to exert physical and psychological control over them. What has changed after circuit breaker measures were put in place is that the abuser's ability to control has been magnified. So one question that we get asked quite frequently is, why have women not been able to leave abusive relationships? There are multiple reasons for this. Chief among them is fear. We've heard from callers who say that their perpetrators have threatened to kill themselves or harm their kids if the victim decides to leave. Another reason, and this is linked to COVID, could be financial dependence. You know, if they have sort of made up their minds that they want to leave an abusive relationship, they have to figure out where they're going to stay. They have to figure out who's going to take care of their kids, whether or not they're going to have a job, how are they going to survive. But if your means of financial independence, if your job has been taken away from you because of COVID, then you may not be on such a strong footing to leave an abusive relationship.
Can perpetrators learn to deal with their stress better? We spoke to Benny, a family therapist who started an initiative to help men who are facing high levels of stress this pandemic. He shares more about his experience dealing with potential perpetrators of abuse.
We've seen increase in the number of men coming forward, willing to come forward for help, even before the circuit breaker.
Oh, even before the circuit breaker. Okay.
Even before the circuit breaker. And we see men and women more so coming out and asking for help during this period.
For both victim and abuser, the usual escape, I guess, is to step out of the house and cool down, but that's no longer available.
There's also the added concern about employment. Many of the men that they work with are breadwinners. Sometimes they're sole breadwinners. So when they don't have employment, this becomes a constant source of worry. Getting angry is not something we can control, but how you act out your aggression, your anger, that you can control. Some men don't realize that there are ways of helping you, skills you can learn, action you can take to stop you from acting in aggressive fashion. We are not saying we're going to make you a saint overnight. You're not going to feel angry anymore. No such program exists. But even though you're angry, we can help you know how to express it, channel it in a way that doesn't hurt everyone, including you.
As passers-by, is there anything we can do if we aren't close to the victims or the abusers?
How do they know when to step in? Like, it might just be a one-off fight, you know, like, am I meddling if I step in? How to lower that, that barrier?
It's also important to equip yourself with the knowledge that enables you to recognize the signs of potential abuse. And this is especially important because domestic abuse doesn't always look obvious from the outside, right? It's not always screaming, it's not always loud arguments. I think it's important to remember that you should try and signal to the person at the receiving end of abuse that you're there for them.